All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Brittany. I am the manager of social media for Discovery Place. Today, I'm excited to speak to you, to John Mackay, about a shark that was recently named after him. And we have guests June Ebersole and Elliot Provance with us. If you haven't heard of the Mackie Shark, that's okay. It was just discovered. Recently, scientists discovered the species through hundreds of shark teeth found in rock layers in central Alabama. In just a little, we're going to speak to June Ebersole, who's the director of collections at the McWane Science Center, who is part of the team of scientists who named the species. The shark was named after John, who served as president and CEO for both the McWane Science Center in Birmingham, Alabama, and Discovery Place in Charlotte, North Carolina. His long career as a science and environmental educator began in 1960 as a youth volunteer working at the Charlotte Nature Museum, which we now know as Discovery Place Nature. Currently, John is retired, but works as a consultant and advisor for other museums and startup projects, served on the board of several nonprofit cultural organizations, and continues to pursue lifelong interests. June is the director of collections at McWane Science Center and oversees the largest paleontology collection in Alabama. He's both an archaeologist and paleontologist and an authority on fossil sharks and bony fish from the U.S. Gulf coastal plain. He has discovered various new fossil species of sharks, stingrays, chimeras, and marine turtles, and studies recent sharks in the Gulf of Mexico. So now let's talk sharks. John and June, I'm really happy that you guys are with us today. I'm really excited to talk to you. June, so let's start. And why don't you give us a little background on what we now know as the Mackie Shark?
Yes. Well, everybody, thank you for tuning in. So the Mackie Shark, we just discovered this one and announced it a little over a month ago. We actually announced two species of shark within the same study. Both within the genus called Menoritotus. The Mackie shark in particular lived just after the time of the dinosaurs. All right, so everybody knows the story about the meteorite hitting the earth and wiping out 75 to 80% of life at one time. Well, one of the survivors that really prospered when the earth was trying to recover was the Mackie shark. I'm going to actually show you some of the Mackie shark teeth here. Sharks, you don't get whole skeletons. Basically, in the fossil record, you're going to get teeth. And so this whole species is actually known from teeth that look like this. All right, so we know the Mackie shark from hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of teeth that we're finding in these 65 million year old rock layers in central Alabama. So these particular ones we're finding in Lowndes County, but my colleagues and I were also studying the same time period in other states, and we've also discovered the Mackie shark as far west as Arkansas.
June, I'm going to have you, right now we can see your desktop, but I'll let you know we can see, which is a very cool desktop. Really.
Let's do this again. Oop. Thanks for letting me know that.
I'm impressed because your desktop looks a lot better than my desktop.
It doesn't. All right, so here's Mackie shark teeth. All right, so these are generally pretty small, half an inch for most of them. But they were found in central Alabama, which is kind of strange, but this is where the shoreline was 65 million years ago. Very unique shark. We're able to tell a lot just from these teeth. There is a misconception that when you're, when paleontologists are out in the field, we pick up a fossil and announce, it's a new species. Doesn't really work like that with sharks. It happens after months and months and months of scrutinizing these teeth in the lab. Generally, what we have to do is find a modern analog, meaning sharks have heterodony, meaning the teeth are going to be shaped different depending on where they are in the mouth. So we have to figure out the heterodony, where just because a tooth is shaped different doesn't mean it's a different species. It can just be from the back of the mouth or the bottom part of the jaw or the upper jaw or the middle of the mouth. Well, a modern analog for this one, the Mackie shark in particular was an unbelievably close match to modern sand tiger sharks. If you look at sand tiger sharks, they're common along the Atlantic coast. You should get them right off the coast of North Carolina and South Carolina, going all the way up to the northeast coast there. They're known as Snaggletooth Sharks. If you zoom in on their heads here, you can actually see these snaggly teeth where they have 5 rows of teeth that are going to be rotating out. So what I had to do for part of the Mackie Shark project was take a jaw from one of these and take the front row of teeth out, line them out so I can actually start matching the Mackie Shark teeth up with them. That's what we're seeing right here. So here is half the jaw from a modern sand tiger shark. This is the right side. So if you're a fish inside the mouth of a sand tiger shark, this is what you're looking at. Half the upper teeth from the right side and half the lower teeth. And you can see how different the teeth look depending on where you are. The upper teeth are different from the lower teeth. These middle teeth here are different from the cheek teeth. These ones near the jaw hinge are tiny, tiny. What we were able to do was take these Mackie Shark teeth, here's a whole bunch of them, we were able to actually match it up almost identical to the modern sand tiger shark, showing us that they are closely related or have very, very similar diets. The second species we named, Menorotodus parmlii, same thing. So all three species differ slightly, but if you look at just the similarities here, look at this unique tooth. All right, so generally the teeth will start bending towards the jaw hinge, depending on where you are in the mouth. This particular one bends towards the middle of the mouth. It's got these things called root lobes, which go off to the side. Look at this extended one, then it's got a short one. Exact same thing you're seeing here on the Mackie shark. It's a very diagnostic tooth for sand tigers and their relatives. The main fang here is bending towards the middle of the mouth, long leg, short leg. We didn't find any of these what are called intermediate teeth. We should have a couple here in this gap, just too small. We didn't find them at the site. But the lower teeth, they just match up perfect. So we can really, from hundreds of different individuals, Frankenstein together what the dentition of this shark looked like. So that was really the basis of the study, but we have two different species here, closely related to the sand tiger sharks, but separated by 30 million years. So when I was first showing these to people, they were saying, well, how come these just aren't modern sand tiger teeth? Well, the Mackie shark is 65 million years old. You can't have a single species persist for that long. So that was number one, where we know it's at least a new species, but it also has a new genus name, meaning we got to name the first name and last name because it was so different. Menorotodus, we didn't come up with that name. Sharks with this dentition from this time period have been described from elsewhere in the world, but not in North America. They're known from Kazakhstan and France. So this is the first time we have these Menorotodus sharks here. Ours just happen to be different enough to be two different species. What really makes these unique, and here's some close-ups of some of the teeth here. All right, so these are some of the upper teeth. So they have this long fang part here. It's called the main cusp. Here's the root that's generally embedded into the gum tissue. It's kind of holding it to the jaw. But they have these little side fangs. But in between those side fangs, we get these things called denticles. These little, just little bumps right in between the side fang and the main cusp, the main needle-like crown here. Very unique. You don't see this in any modern sand tigers. I probably looked at, I don't know, 15 to 20 modern sand tiger jaws, from baby ones to adult ones, at various museums. Not a single tooth showed this. But the rest of the tooth, very, very, very close, matched that dentition of recent sand tiger sharks. So these denticles are very interesting. Sometimes they get pretty gnarly. Look at this. I mean, just a whole bunch of them lined up here. Here's a couple little bumps. Sometimes it's just a little slit. Other times it's a fairly pronounced bump or spike. But we get a bunch that are like this. They're generally in the upper cheek teeth. You can start getting a whole bunch of these little denticles between that side fang and the main fang. So it was a very, very cool shark, and it really told us a lot about how the oceans 65 million years ago were recovering from this major extinction event. What sort of sharks were really favored for that type of environment.
What are some differences between sharks that you would, I guess, deem prehistoric and sharks that you would find today?
Sharks are very interesting to study because they have the longest fossil record of any vertebrates. And so sharks, as we think of them, they've been on Earth for over 400 million years. But the sharks that we know of are basically going to be from the time of the dinosaurs and later. The sharks from before the dinosaurs drastically different. There's a whole bunch of different dentitions, the way that the teeth replace, different families and orders and so forth that don't survive anymore. And those types of tooth replacement or dentitions didn't last until today. But once you get to the middle part of the dinosaurs, the Jurassic, the last period of the dinosaurs, the Cretaceous, and every time period after, you can use modern sharks as analogs. It's going to match some sort of dentition from some sort of shark that's living in the oceans today. And so as a shark paleontologist, I'm studying the recent ones just as much as I'm studying the fossil ones, where the fossil ones are telling us a lot about the evolution of sharks, what led to the recent ones. But I got to study the recent ones as it's telling us all about the biological processes and tooth replacement and dentition patterns that are happening in these fossil ones.
We did get a question on Facebook. So if someone said, if they go and look for a Mackie Shark tooth on their next trip to the North Carolina coast, are they likely to find one?
Unfortunately, no. Here's why. All right, so to find the Mackie Shark, you have to have a certain age of rock. All right, so here's, for example, is the geologic map of Alabama, where every single one of these colors here is a different rock formation or sediment that was laid down at a different time period. Good example would be if you want to find dinosaurs, you have to go to dinosaur age rocks. You can't go to rocks that are formed before the dinosaurs or after the dinosaurs. For the Mackie Shark, we had to go to one particular little lens right down here, which is right on what's called the KPG boundary. All people also call it the KT boundary. That's the extinction event where below that KT boundary or KPG boundary, you get dinosaurs. Above it, you don't. This is found right above, just 30 feet above the KPG contact. So 30 feet of sediment from that extinction layer. That only exposes right here where this little green stuff is. All right. And so on the North Carolina coast, unfortunately, it's much younger sediments. You're going to get more stuff from what's called the Eocene period or the Miocene period, much younger than the Mackie Shark. You would have to go to places like New Jersey, Mississippi, Arkansas, little spots of South Carolina, but the coast of North Carolina, unfortunately, no, the teeth are going to be too young.
Well, and of course, Alabama.
Alabama, of course.
So, John, how does it feel to have a shark named after you?
Well, I mean, I like to tell the story that when June first told me about this, I thought he was kidding me. The truth of the matter was, I like to tell the story, and I probably have a few grandchildren who are watching this right now, but I think they think I'm a fossil anyway, so it seemed appropriate. But I am honored. I really am honored, and it was nice to harken back to those days at the McWane Science Center when we built the place. And June can tell the story a little bit more than I can. But you know, my role there was the CEO, as you have already pointed out, Brittany, and you know, so I had a little bit of a role in the creation of that particular museum. But I never dreamed that the thing that I probably was most fond of, which were in fact the collections, that I would have an honor bestowed on me, like June has so graciously done. Thank you, June.
Well deserved.
We did get another question on Facebook. How, and hopefully I will say this correctly, how do we know that these differences are not intraspecific variation?
Because we have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of teeth from all different time periods. It's kind of why these studies take a long time, not only figuring out the heterodony, but we also have ontogenetic stages, meaning a lot of times sharks' teeth will change in shape from a baby to an adult because their diet changes. But we have a whole ontogenetic sequence here. We had everything from juveniles to subadults to adults, and you can tell them by the size, all showing these same unique characteristics.
So, John, why don't you talk a little bit about the significance of these kinds of findings to the world and our understanding of it?
Well, I think that you know, we're very focused right now on who we are and what we're experiencing right now in the world, and that's appropriate. I mean, this is the time frame in which we live, but all that is out there in terms of life has had, in many cases, has had previous life as sort of our progenitors, if you will. You know, if you think in terms of evolution, you know, time moves forward, species change, they adapt to the changing conditions that surround them, the immediate environment, the climate, all the things that we talk about a lot with regard to global climate change. These are animals, these sharks particularly are animals that have been highly adaptable. We've had examples of sharks that have gone extinct, but if you really look at the Mackie Shark and these other sharks that June has been discovering, quite frankly, they haven't changed a whole lot. They've been able to continue on even through fairly significant changes in the environment. So that gives you a little bit of hope, really. I don't know how the human species will fare, but at least we know that life will continue on this planet, quite likely for many, 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 many millions of years into the future. So I think it's significant. And when we study these animals, we need to put it into that kind of perspective, as well as just the sheer fun of wonder and discovery that all of us are really keen to. Think about this. If you're really anyone, but I think particularly of children who are out and they find shark's teeth, that's a thrilling experience. it could even be richer if they began to understand the particular shark it came from, what kind of time frame the shark lived, and just really understanding the fact that nature has continued on way into the deep past and likely will into the deep future.
June, I'm curious, when you found these teeth, how are you able to kind of narrow it down to 65 million years ago? How are you able to narrow down the time frame? That seems pretty specific.
Yes. So you don't date the actual fossils themselves. People think that, oh, you do radiocarbon dated or such. Radiocarbon dating is more of an archaeological thing, only works for the youngest of the young fossils, things that are 50,000 years or less. When it comes to older fossils, like this one, for example, you have to date the rock layer that it's in or the sediment layer that it's in. And there's various ways to do that. When you're dealing with marine sediments here, so we're talking about shallow oceans that deposited these teeth in Alabama, we look at what are called nanoplankton zones, foram zones, ostracod zones, where the sediments that are making up the limestones and the chalks, they're actually microscopic skeletons of plankton. And these plankton have very short lifespans. And so globally, there's a correlation where we can look at different combinations of these plankton. And when you get that combination in one place and then in another place, we know they're the same age. That's step one. So it's what's called biostratigraphy. You're getting the same fossils in the same layers, showing us that no matter where they are, they're going to be the same age. Now, getting a numeric age on those comes down to radiometric dating. So similar to radiocarbon dating, but we use other types of isotopes, mainly stuff that's coming out of volcanoes, all right? Uranium. Uranium will actually turn into lead. So when we find these zones that are the same age, the same fossils that are in there, we have hopes that one of these sites globally will have a volcano that has ash in there, which is directly datable, that'll give us that date. For the Mackie Shark, it became a little bit easier because it's right above the KPG boundary, that extinction event where we have this global layer of uridium. All right, uridium is basically comes from two places, volcanoes and from outer space and meteorites. All right, so when that asteroid hit in the Gulf of Mexico, spewed all this ash layer that covered the Earth, settled down and created this iridium layer, which we have here exposed in Alabama. All I had to do was just go look and say, there's the KPG boundary, dinosaur age fossils below it, after the dinosaur age fossils above it, and just seeing that without an eyesight, I could see how far this was just above the layer. Knowing that that extinction event happened 65.5 million years ago, didn't take long for that 30 feet of sediment to form. And so 65 million years is a pretty close estimate for all these teeth.
Someone else asked, is there anywhere else in the world outside of the US that the Mackie Shark, or that there's the rock that the Mackie Shark could be found in?
Yes. So again, it comes down to finding that right time period. So the KPG boundary is mostly studied on land. People want to see this terrestrial transition from the death of the dinosaurs to the things that survived after. But the world's oceans were also there at the same time, all full of life before the extinction event and then just little survivors after. So you have to be able to find the Mackie Shark. You have to find marine deposits of that age. So you want to hunt for that KPG boundary. So go to those sites, then you can start looking. Here in the southeastern US, the Mackie Shark is the dominant shark. I would say 6 out of every 10 teeth happen to be the Mackie Shark from this particular time period. So if you're in the southeast, at least, and you're finding that particular aged rocks or sediment, yeah, you're going to be able to find some Mackie Shark teeth. But the question is how widely distributed are they? They're older than the ones elsewhere. It seems that they originated here in the Gulf of Mexico, in the southeastern US, and then they went out to other parts of the world. So you probably have to go to slightly younger rock layers if you're in Europe or Africa or so forth, because it does seem that they originated here.
All right. I've got one more question for you. And that is, how would someone learn more about prehistoric sharks? This is something that they're interested in, maybe for a hobby or maybe for a career. What would they have to do in order to get more information about this?
If you're interested in just as a hobby, shark's teeth are the most widely collected fossil out there. Everybody seems to be wanting megalodon teeth and such. But they're so widely distributed, every country you can find these things. Most of the states in the US are going to have, shark's teeth from one particular time period or another. And so it doesn't take much to find them. Someone mentioned the North Carolina coast. It's a great place to go find them. But for information, since they're so widely collected and there's just so many of them out there, you could just get online and just look in your area on what fossil sharks have been found. You're going to see all sorts of teeth. I can't tell you how many books there are out on there, even the kids' books, to help you identify your teeth. It's one of the things I specialize in. You can always go to McWane.org, our website, and you'll see all sorts of publications identifying the ones from this particular area. If people are interested in studying fossil sharks or going into paleontology, this day and age, you're going to need an advanced degree, master's, and then PhD after that, then generally postdocs, which is a research appointment after your PhD. Generally, you're going to have a degree in either geology or biology, an advanced degree, sometimes both. So you also need to be going to a university that has these programs. With sharks, since there's such a long fossil record and they're still, in the oceans today, having that biological background really helps you out with the fossil stuff. But you have to have that geology background so you can find these right aged rock layers, these right. You got to figure out where you can look and narrow it down to figure out where you can start finding these things.
So before, and we're not letting you go for long, because at the end we'll have you come back in, and anybody who has any questions we'll be able to ask you. But for now, if someone wants to follow along with McWane Science Center, where could they find you on social media? And then just want to tell us the website one more time.
Yes, and so you can just Google McWane Science Center or go to McWane.org. That's MCWANE. You can also, friend us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We might even have a Pinterest page, I'm not sure. I have my own research pages, so you can explore our collection online on McWane.org, see publications, see news stories about the collection and fossil sharks. Dozens and dozens of stories came out about the Mackie Shark if you'd like to learn more about it. Read the news stories, they kind of cover everything. So.
Awesome, we will talk to you soon. Great. So next we're going to invite Elliot on. Elliot Provance is our Director of Collections and manages the departments that curate and care for living and non-living collections. He's owned Discovery Place since 2004 after graduating from UNCC in 2003. Hi, Elliot. Thanks for joining us.
Hey there. Thanks for...
Why don't you go ahead and start? So I want to ask you to tell us a little bit about the work that we've done at Discovery Place, that you've done specifically with coral reefs, but also what that pertains to sharks. I know we're having a big discussion today about sharks, so people might be curious why I'm asking about coral reef studies. So if you can kind of tie that gap a little bit as to why that's important, that'd be great.
Sure, yeah, so since 2012, Discovery Place has been a participant with Seacorps International, which is a global conservation group that works with coral restoration and coral conservation. And Seacorps is unique in that they focus on the sexual reproduction of corals as opposed to asexual reproduction of corals like we do here at Discovery Place Science. You can always break off a branch of coral and plant it back out on the reef or in our aquariums, and it would be the genetic identical copy of its parent colony. So Seacorps identified that by collecting coral spawn, you can cross-fertilize different colonies and maintain genetic diversity, which is essential for any conservation movement. So we have been proud participants for a little while, and we have some pictures of that. In 2017, a team of us from Discovery Place went to help out down in Curacao, which is just north of Venezuela in the Caribbean. And we went diving. I've got another picture here. Basically to watch coral spawn, which this coral here, this Alcorn coral, is actually one that Seacorps produced by cross-fertilizing different colonies. And we artificially planted it back out on a breaker wall that's in front of the Sea Aquarium down there in Curacao. So it's exciting work, and we've been eager to participate in that since coral reefs are kind of the focus of the World Alive Aquarium here at Discovery Place. So next picture shows these are the vials that we collected, the coral bundles. Essentially, there's coral eggs and sperm in those vials, and we were able to separate the sperm from the eggs and then cross-fertilize them. And that's Dr. Amy Ringwood and her grad student from UNC Charlotte. They have been research collaborators with us since 2013. And we've worked on 3 different research projects over the years, and it's something that we're very proud to be a part of. But to get to the second part of your question as to why are sharks important, sharks are a very valuable part of the ecosystem of coral reefs, and it's because trophically they're tied to the food web that is extremely complex in coral reefs. And if you didn't have sharks, there are other predator fish that would start to increase in numbers that sharks kind of keep in control. And then those fish would actually eat these smaller herbivorous fish that kind of help keep algae at bay. Algae is one of the #1 competitors with coral. Plant-like algae just grows wherever there's strong sunlight, and they can actually overgrow a coral colony. And if you go to an unhealthy coral reef ecosystem, you'll see lots of algae, whether it's microalgae or macroalgae, just growing all over the coral colonies. So sharks keep the balance going. And likewise, coral reefs are important to sharks because they provide that food for the sharks. They provide shelter for them when they're in breeding season, and also nurseries for their young. Some shark species have actually adapted to live their entire lives on coral reefs. So without the coral reefs, they wouldn't have a home.
So why are sharks important in their ecosystem?
Our ecosystem, it's pretty similar. They're an apex predator, so they keep the balance. They keep everything in check. Once you pull one part of a food web out, there can be a cascading effect that can lead to another species taking an opportunity, and they can become invasive, and sometimes that can lead to kind of a ecosystem collapse. So you can think of things like the lionfish that's invading the Caribbean and the Atlantic Ocean. They would not be in such great numbers if whatever predators are keeping them in check in the Indo-Pacific were present in the Atlantic. And overfishing and a whole host of different environmental problems have put sharks kind of on the watch list. They are essentially endangered across the world, thanks to things like shark finning and overfishing. And so things like the lionfish are just taking advantage of that.
So does Discovery Place work with any sharks?
Yeah, so we have a species currently called Heterodontus japonicus, or the Japanese horn shark. Horn sharks are small carpet sharks is what they're called. Carpet sharks can breathe without moving. They're not ram ventilated like classic gray white that has to actually swim to breathe. Since we don't have very large aquariums in the World Alive Aquarium, we stick with smaller carpet sharks so that we can provide them with the adequate space that they need. But we participate in a breeding program amongst AZA institutions with these Japanese horn sharks, and they're really cool to look at. And yeah, definitely would encourage anybody whenever we're open again to come check them out.
So John, you had worked closely with and correct me if I'm wrong, with our exhibits at Discovery Place. Did you work closely with the aquarium? Did you have a favorite spot in the museum? Which I'm kind of hoping you say aquarium since we're talking about sharks right now.
Well, I don't think you're going to have any problem with my response. Of course, it was the aquarium and the rainforest. As Elliot knows, I have a long history with the aquarium, and because the original aquarium, the original exhibits, even though I was at that time, I was not the chief executive officer for the museum. I was in charge of that area, and this is going back to 1980, 81 when we opened, of course. And those exhibits were the exhibits that I planned and did a lot of the actual physical labor for that, as well as the rainforest. And honestly, Ellie will tell you, when I was CEO, coming forward now quite a few years, almost every day I would wander down to get my fix. And he was always so gracious. I will say that the aquarium exhibits that you see now have really resulted from the work that Elliot did when we did our renovation way back, whenever that was, I think 2010. And Elliot really just did a wonderful job of making those exhibits really sparkle. They were really terrific. So that's all.
I will say it's one of my favorite spots, and I do the same when I'm in the museum. I tend to wander down and see what Elliot is up to, or I email him and ask him questions about, almost all the time we'll get questions on Facebook, identifying something, or curious if people are on beach vacations and they come across something. Recently, somebody found what looked like a shark tooth. And so I think it's very cool that we have that resource and that we can kind of answer people's questions. And It's one of my favorite spots as well.
I'll
Elliot, were you surprised?
I'll have to say, Brittany, the other, going back to the McWane Science Center, when I was the chief executive officer there and we were building the new science center, I often would leave my office. You know, it was all about fundraising. It was all about planning and meetings. But I'd leave my office sometimes around 6 or 7, change into my blue jeans and goes downstairs. The World of Water exhibit is, I think that's the title. It's been so long now, but the aquarium exhibits at McWane Science Center are down in the basement. So I'd go down to the basement and we would then start working on the plumbing and putting all the tanks together and all the life support systems. And I would often stay up there till well after midnight, often well into the wee hours, and then change back into my business clothes in the morning, ready for meetings again. But it's a real passion of mine to develop these marine and freshwater exhibits, although that's many years in the past now. And I really appreciate the advances that these younger, more knowledgeable people have brought to that field.
I will say, you are getting lots of positivity on Facebook for your impact on science education. You're very popular. So that also just goes back to you getting a shark named after you. People in the community are have very positive things to say.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate those comments that others have sent in. That means a lot. That means a lot to me. And again, I owe the naming of the shark, to June Ebersole and his not only his scientific work, but also the fact that, you know, June was there when I was there, and it was quite an experience working with June as well. So.
Yeah, and you know, well deserved for John. If you actually read the paper, there is a section that actually talks about the naming of the species and why, and really is in honor of John and his lifelong commitment to informal education. Especially, you know, I owe John personally a lot. If you don't know the story of McWane Science Center, John was brought on as CEO to build it from the ground up, and it was really his vision, which kind of paved the way for all of this. Where there was a small natural history museum in the Birmingham metro area that John had the foresight to try to get that merged in to the Science Center. A lot of people were against it, but John fought for it. And it turned out to be a world-class paleontology collection. John's the one that hired me back in 1999, and it really set up my career, having such an unbelievable asset here at the museum with such an unbelievable fossil record. I mean, we're the #1 state. Alabama's the #1 state in the US for fossils. We didn't know it at the time, but because John had the foresight to get this collection, it's really put McWane Science Center on the map and really set up my career for me. So on a personal reason, that was just the kind of the other reason, just to honor John with this shark.
Thank you, June.
Someone asked if you could drop a link to the paper that you were referencing earlier, and then we can just post it on Facebook.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
That'd be great. Do any of you have any tips? So if someone goes to the beach next time and now they're inspired and they want to see if they can find something, how would they find shark teeth? Any tips that they have if they want to go and find their own shark teeth?
Yes. So if you're on the beach, you do have a chance to find shark's teeth. Just know that they're going to be rare. But people find them all the time. I'm one of the few people that studies fossil sharks from the southeast of the United States and from the East Coast. So I get people from all over different states sending me stuff. So I know stuff is being found all over the Atlantic coast, where a good tip is look for the lag deposits. And you know what I'm talking about was when you're walking the beach, you're just going to have sand and you're going to have a little concentration of shells. All right. That means that these shells are being washed up for some particular reason in that particular area. That's the place to hunt. If you're just walking and just looking down, chances are you're not going to find anything because most of the shark's teeth are going to be small, from smaller species. I have been emailed a number of times great white teeth that are found just right there in the North Carolina coast at the Outer Banks and such. Great. You can find the big ones. The big ones are going to be the ones that you can spot just by walking. But if you want to really get them, take Windows screen size screen with you. So if you just go to the dollar store and get one of those little kitchen colanders, take that and scoop those little shell zones. So what I do is I shake out all the sand, put it in a bag, and I keep on doing that where I have a giant Ziploc bag just full of those shells. That's what we call a shell hash. Take that home with you, and then just start spreading it out on a white sheet of paper and start sorting through it. That's how you're going to start finding the teeth. There are obviously certain spots in the US you can go where there's just tremendous amounts. there are these tremendous lag deposits. So Florida is the shark tooth capital of the world. You can go to certain beaches there where there's these fossil coral reefs just offshore where every morning they're washing them in. Maryland is like that as well, a place called Calvert Cliffs. But a lot of these ancient shorelines were not where the shoreline is today. So you actually need to come inland. The world was much hotter during these ancient time periods where the shoreline, sometimes these Mackie Shark teeth are found 100 miles inland. And so I'm going to places like strip mines or road cuts and those types of things to find teeth. I have better luck there than on the beach. So.
I will say I'm from Florida and I grew up on the beach and I have never once found a shark tooth. I feel like I failed a little bit. It's a shark tooth capital and I have nothing to show for it. I'm a little disappointed.
They're just, most will be small. And I mean, some are only a few millimeters tall. And so you really got to screen and collect the stuff to find them.
That's fair. Maybe next time I'll do that and I'll see if I can find one. I'll send a picture to you.
Sure, absolutely.
So Elliot, a few more questions and then we'll wrap up in case anybody, if you're watching on Facebook, you have any questions for anybody, please feel free to ask. We're happy to answer them. But we asked June, you kind of told us what you'd have to study to, you know, if you are more interested in prehistoric sharks. But Elliot, what kind of areas of study would you need to do if you wanted to work in an aquarium or if you wanted to work in collections, in live collections?
Sure, yeah. I would recommend that you study biology, at least initially. A biology degree, particularly marine biology, could be very valuable, especially if you're interested in sharks. But if you're interested just as a citizen and maybe not career path, our neighbors down at the North Carolina coast, North Carolina Aquariums, there's 30 North Carolina Aquariums, Wilmington, Fort Fisher, and then Pine Knoll Shores and Manio Bay. They are, within the aquarium industry, leaders at shark conservation. They've got a lot of projects going on, including one that's a citizen science project called Spot a Shark. So if you're out snorkeling or swimming or doing whatever, it's possible for you to snap a picture of the shark you see. That citizen science project is allowing them to gather a lot of data about what species of shark are where and how to identify an individual shark. They've had individual sharks photoed all over the place, and that kind of tells them the travel patterns for different species of shark. Also, the North Carolina Coast Aquarium, or North Carolina Coast, is known as the graveyard of the Atlantic, I believe it is. There's so many different shipwrecks that schools of fish are really attracted to these shipwrecks, and then sharks are obviously attracted to schools of fish for prey. So the North Carolina coast is particularly unique for live sharks. There's a lot of great diving outfits out there where you can go respectfully and peacefully just observe sharks around shipwrecks, and I'd highly recommend that.
That's great. So we are wrapping up. I would like to leave, we got a comment, and I think this is a great way to kind of wrap this up. Someone had said that the legacy of paleontology in John Mackay and Elliot Provance and June Ebersole is that humanity more thoroughly understands the principles of extinction, evolutionary change, and biodiversity, and most important, how all of these things help us to strike a balance between quality of life and quality of the environment. I hope Discovery Place will do more events such as this who depict the heroes of museums. So you guys are very highly regarded. I can't thank you enough for taking time out of your day and being here talking about this. I think it's something very important to talk about. I think it's something very interesting to talk about. June, you had said where people can follow you. If anybody has any other questions, you can leave them in the chat. I will make sure that they are answered. If you want to ask Elliot any questions, feel free to follow us on Facebook at Discovery Place, on Instagram at Discovery Place, leave a comment. And I know that you all are more than happy to answer any questions that come your way, because I know that you guys are very passionate about this. If anybody has any last words before we say goodbye, I'll open up the floor to you.
Just congratulations to John. So it's all because of you.
Thank you.
Congratulations to both of you guys.
Thank you, Elliot. Elliot, thank you, June. Thank you, Brittany. Thank you. It was my pleasure to be involved in this. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.